Welcome to this, I think, the fifth episode of Villagers Podcast. We took a little break for a minute to travel the world and mother babies and do all kinds of things. And we're back, and I've got the best guest today that I am so excited to share with you. This one's personal. I love her personally, but Alexis Asbe is a creative powerhouse, genius woman that I am honored to have personally mentor me. And her experience, her world and life experience is invaluable. Let me just tell you a little bit, okay? So at 24, Alexis founded California's leading wedding and special event companies. With tremendous passion for creative and evocative design, Alexis began with only a small space in her garage and developed one of the country's most celebrated event and design companies. Her clients included families, celebrities, well-known political figures, and even British royalty. Her work was featured in CBS Evening Magazine, Extreme Makeover Home Edition. She started up and sold several companies worth millions, written a best-selling book, At the Altar in Your Underwear, A Brave Guide to Love Before, During, and After Your Wedding, which I haven't read, and I need to read that book. Over the past 20 years, she's supported small businesses and organizations to increase workplace wellness by aligning with feminine leadership. How powerful. As her clients use their tools and practices she shares with them, they celebrate increased morale, profits, and productivity, as well as increased intimacy in their relationships, happier home lives, more joy-filled adventures. Alexis is a spiritual guide, mystic, self-care addict, feminine leadership advocate, individual and organizational performance consultant, wife, mother, and a force that is undefined. May we all be as such. She's hopelessly addicted to what really matters, driving her husband crazy and raising a rebellious generation that serves truth and knows their divinity. Ugh, what a mic drop. Without further ado, welcome Alexis Asbe.
Thank you. Wow. I haven't heard that in a long time. It was, I noticed that in my body. I was like, boy, I'm exhausted.
Every time you've told me a new story about something that you've done or created, I'm like, how have you done so much in your short lifetime? Truly inspiring. And I think the thing that inspires me the most is the way that you have learned to boss business and leadership roles and flourish in like masculine dominated environments while absolutely empowering your feminine and kind of like groundbreaking in that, like as a woman in business, as a woman in leadership. But I know that it wasn't always the case for you. I know that you've had to learn this along the way. I guess I guess before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself in any way, like, and your story in any little way, or shall I just hit you with questions?
I think you should hit me with questions. I have lots of stories.
Great.
And, my story today is that my job is to fan the flames and the wings of women like yourself. And that's pretty much what turns me on right now. So
That's incredible. And you do it so well.
thank you.
I know that we're going to probably talk a lot about like femininity, divine femininity, and that's kind of a buzzword right now. I feel like it gets thrown around a lot, but I would really love your insight on that. How would you explain this concept of the divine feminine?
So first of all, am I allowed to swear on this podcast? So, and I know that there's a lot of
Yes.
moms with children around. And so I just want to say, I do have a bit of an intentional potty mouth. And so I just want to say, if you have littles around, it might be best to put on your headphones, or, you never know when I'm going to drop a naughty word or something.
So wise of you, as I just let it loose. Is really thoughtful and a good
Yeah.
piece of
So
advice.
to define the word, or the this really interesting buzzword called the divine feminine, I think there's a lot of fuckery around it, quite frankly. Yeah, it started. This word has been around for quite some time. However, mainstream media has really got a hold of it as this way. And I think it became introduced in more of the Tantra and the settings of this, when social media awakened to women dancing on the internet to express their femininity. And that became the divine expression of the feminine, which really isn't what a divine feminine is or divine masculine. The truth is that we're all divine feminines and we're all divine masculines. Men are divine, women are divine, right? It's I think that the intention, the original intention of the word divine is to hold people to their sacred truth, to hold people in their knowing of who they really are, in the consciousness of spirituality. And so the divine feminine movement, I'm not really sure about why we have to preface anyone or any human with that sort of tagline.
I think that's really insightful because we're all divine.
Correct.
As it is. Yeah, maybe we've just lost track of it a little bit, so the reminder is needed, but it gets tangled up with a lot of extra baggage of what that looks like to be like a divine feminine woman.
Yeah. And a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm not quite sure I fit the imagery or the costuming for the divine feminine.
What would you think what does that present to you as? Like when you see it in out and about, in what ways don't you fit that?
Well, I think that it can be really off-putting, especially for a woman in business, you know? I mean, I'm certainly not going to waltz into a conference room I'm going to waltz in what I feel comfortable with, you know? And, you know, I've worked at places like Google and, you know, people wear basketball shorts and custom Nike high tops, and that's divine for them. But I think that what can be really hard for women especially is this sort of like, and everybody has the right to dress however they like or, you know, decorate themselves however they like. However, I think that the internet can give people a really skewed perception of what our divinity can look like, right? Yeah. And I think that all of us carry it. And I think that there's a lot of consciousness and CEOs that are very divine in the way that they're approaching their leadership, but they're not necessarily dancing with tambourines or, you know, wearing an Egyptian priestess outfit. So there's that.
Yeah. Do you think this goes kind of hand in hand with the idea that like even now in this age of a lot of openness and fluidity around gender, there being some strong stereotypes over what femininity is and expresses as?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about
that? You know, there's this whole there's the whole idea of feminine energetics and femininity, I think, that are misunderstood. You know, the way that I really see the feminine is, I see the feminine as earth, as nature, right? And sometimes she is a volcano, and sometimes she is a bright sunny day, and sometimes she's a raging fire, and sometimes she's, you know, a beautiful, serene, trickling creek or river, and everything in between, right? So to define femininity or the feminine energetic as what I think that we have as a culture have really seen femininity as, which is, you know, that sort of like June Cleaver, 1950s, you know, pleated skirt and you know, like, you know, very
docile,
very amicable. Not, the feminine is not always amicable. And that, you know, I think that people in general want to be kind and want to be approachable, but not always is that energetic, docile or submissive.
I think that's really powerful. I personally, even though I don't remember being specifically taught this, I definitely felt a dissonance with the idea of femininity and very much equated it with what I perceived as girliness. And I didn't want to like wear pink and frilly dresses and blah, blah. I was unhappy when I got my period. I didn't want to talk about it. I very much rejected a lot of these like things that I associated with femininity because maybe I associated it with weakness or with submissiveness or with genteelness and quietness, and I was always loud and messy and awkward and too opinionated, and none of those things seemed to fit into the box that had been presented to me as like what it is to be a nice feminine young lady. And I think that you have probably never fit into that box either.
Actually, I really fit into that box of I was raised, I'll just back up. So I was raised by a woman of color. My mom is
Mm-hmm.
Filipina. She was the vice president of finance for the fifth largest air freighting company in the world. My grandmother, her mother, was a trained doctor, right? Back then, though, if you were of any class in the Philippines, you didn't work as a woman. But she was educated
Mm-hmm.
and was really more of like a, she was really more of a holistic, natural doctor. Like, I don't remember going to the
Mm-hmm.
doctor. I remember getting kicked by my horse and, getting my hands wrapped in ginger or things like that, like very medicinal, earthy
Yeah.
kinds of things. But the dichotomy that I saw that was really interesting was that my mother was in an environment where she was actually the vice president leading other men. And so
Mm.
she was really, really controlled and very, very disciplined to a point
Mm.
where it became unhealthy for her. Now, counter that, my grandmother, who's at home with me, right, is,
Mm.
you know, is this very powerful woman, very strong, but also very ritualized, but in a different way, very much in tune with the synchronicities of earth and nature and life and ebb and flow, and sometimes messy,
Mm.
right?
We'll get back to that
Yeah.
one.
So the energetic of messy is actually a feminine energetic. It's the feminine
Yeah.
has a chaotic energetic. And I just want to offer that maybe the reason you didn't subscribe to it is because you could really feel the untruth that was going on. I mean, here we have June Cleaver, right? This feminine sort of like
Mm.
controlled, everything's great. Here's a pie. You're welcome. I have no emotion. That is not the feminine, right?
Yeah.
The feminine is fully
No.
expressed, right? She's all of the
Mm.
things. The rose blooms and then all of the leaves fall up and she reseeds herself and the dirt becomes more fertile and like it's
Mm.
it's it's chaotic in some ways.
Yeah, and let's not get started on menstrual cycle, the
Yes.
bleed,
Yes.
which I would really like to yeah, I would really like to get started
Yeah.
on it a little later. But I'll let you continue with your
So,
your
I
backstory.
had a really interesting sort of perspective of the feminine. My mother, who is super successful, very male dominated, oriented culture,
Mm.
grandmother, completely the opposite. She's at home, you know, that kind of dichotomy was really interesting. And what I knew to be true was that what I saw for my mom was she had a lot of capacity and a lot of desire and a lot of strategy
Mm.
and a lot of genius, and she was is genius. And
Mm.
yet all of that discipline, all of that structure, all of that conformity really started her having some serious health problems. She started having heart attacks at 48 years old. And I
Wow.
believe that's because she was literally conditioned and told that she had to operate in the way of the masculine, right,
Mm.
energetic, in order to be successful. And so
Yeah.
for me, I started off on that path for sure. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I want to hear more about that because creating from the ground up multiple
Hmm.
million-dollar businesses for one, incredible, right? As is so much, so much to be learned from there. But how did this journey happen from like moving through that world in your masculine energy into what you've now so thoroughly embodied as a woman in business, fully actualized in her feminine energy?
Mm.
How did that happen?
Such a great question. So, what was really interesting was that I started my first company at about 23 years old, and I had a woman mentor who I'm still really great friends with. Was very fortunate that she came along and tucked me under her wing, and the business that she started a holistic health company, literally out of the back of a van driving across the country.
No way.
Yes. So I got to work with her as she grew her business. And, some of our consultants and mentors, right?
Mm.
One of them happened to be Michael Gerber. Michael Gerber is a guy that wrote the book, The E Myth. It's still around, it's published in multiple languages. And I literally sat next to Michael, who is this
Mm.
very smart Jewish man who created systems for people like McDonald's and IBM that produced predictable results. So I had a unique opportunity to sit with a man who literally created big companies by systematizing businesses.
Right.
And so,
Like a literal kind of 12-step program. Like, this is what you do to become a big business. Follow these specific
yes.
steps.
So, for example, we had to wear navy gray or black suits with a red accent above the waist if we were a woman, because psychologically, that red accent would make us more appealing to the consumer buying the service. Nude hose, no colored or textured hosiery, or too much jewelry, or minimal makeup was another one of the standards. Naturally, I was awarded multiple years in a row the wildest variation of the dress code without violating it, because that was, just my rebellious streak, and that's what I did. However, what I really got was a really balanced and really integrated approach to my artistry, because I have a degree in art, how to create a business that the feminine can flow in and be creative, while also
Yeah.
producing predictable results and leveraging myself out of the organization so that I didn't have to work and become held hostage to that company.
Which sounds like the dream.
Yes, until the feminine evolves, until she gets
Yeah.
hungry again, until she is ready for another meal, right? Because the feminine
Mm.
is really ravenous. She's, your sister and I, we have this funny thing that we send back and forth about eating hamburgers. And, you know, I'm always really intrigued with the way that people eat. And, women, like when they go on dates, they don't eat, right? They have little tiny nibbles. They don't eat, like they don't get messy. And, they pick up their food, and they put it down, and then they slide their fork across the way. And it's just so delicate and so demure. Fuck that. We're fucking starving, right? We are women who like to eat.
Yes.
Women with capacity and creativity, we are hungry. And there is an energetic that's going on right now where it's like so controlled, and there's this body fat, and we got to do this, we got to do that, where it's just not natural to our systems. And so what happened was, my life started to evolve. I met this really nice guy, and, all I wanted to do was have his babies, and that didn't make any sense at all to me. He smelled really good, but everything logically did not make sense, right?
Those pheromones.
And no, like I was going to marry like a doctor or an attorney or some periodontist I was dating, or a pro hockey player that was going to support me in my creativity, right? But no, I fell in love with a carpenter, right? Who smelled really good, and I wanted to have his children. And so then I had a couple children, and all of a sudden I have this business, and I have, I'm working for people like the Duchess of York and the Vice President of the United States, and, all these, great celebrities. And this is, by the way, prior to the internet, which is also its own unique feat.
Yeah, that's wild,
Yeah.
because how does one get to that? Like, I guess word of mouth and just being really good at what you do, but
Word
like
of mouth,
that is
and
such a feat.
And also, I want to say I unconsciously knew the power of energetics. I loved what I did. Like I was so turned on in my work. Like I was so messy and turned on, and like I remember just like looking down the street and going, I can make something out of those sticks over there. Like how do I do, like, can you please bring those sticks home
Yeah.
for me?
Your
Yeah.
creative energy was just really flowing and unblocked, because this was floral design, right?
Um Design and coordination and lighting and chairs and linens, and
Wow.
we
Because when it gets big like that, it kind of,
yeah. We ended up
yeah.
creating back then. Do you remember those really awful white plastic columns that they had in the weddings, like in the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And those baskets, I fantasize about like creating like a whole like wedding out of that, but that's super retro. Anyways, those were what was available right
Yeah.
at that time. And so we ended up creating a whole line of rental equipment with these giant wrought iron candelabras, and like
Wow.
candles that would go down the aisle that were welded out of iron, and some really fun stuff. But I digress. The way that what happened was that I had these babies, and I started to feel like misaligned, and misaligned in the way that I was making decisions to be at events, because I was doing 15 events a weekend. And
No.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
that was
That's
it
big.
was big. 15 events a weekend, and I would come home and I would be like, feeling really shitty about myself. I'm making a shit ton of money and I'm doing exactly what I said I wanted to do. And I started feeling really guilty and really crappy. And I'd sit on my front porch and cry. And what was going on was that I was changing, right? I was really going from maiden to mother. And this mother, I remember my nanny, it was really this really incredible story because, from the outside looking in, everybody thought that I had it going on. I'm driving the right car. I'm living in the wine country. I've got a studio that looks like something out of Martha Stewart's vineyard. And I've got this super cute husband who, just adores me and builds me anything I want. I've got these 2 healthy babies and I am crying, feeling like so misaligned with what I'm doing.
Wow. I feel like that's probably something a lot of people can relate to in
Yeah,
different
I think women can.
in different ways and areas and seasons.
Yeah.
And then feeling stupid, like, oh, you're so over emotional, like this is done. Get yourself
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Everything's great.
And feeling guilty for feeling the way I felt. But those feelings, that body sensation that was going on for me, where I was feeling like this emptiness as opposed to this energetic fullness, right, was really this my deepest knowing that there was something that needed to change. And I remember going to Hawaii and sitting on the beach, and I heard this very audible voice, and it said, "It's time to stop." And my husband's surfing. I'm thinking, I start talking to this voice. I'm like, it's not time to stop. I know what it's talking about. I know it's telling me it's time to stop what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's not time to stop. I'm in Hawaii for 2 weeks. Like, I can go on vacation. I got a staff. I got everything I've ever wanted, right? And it's saying it's time to stop. And I'm like, I'm losing my mind. We're going to stop talking right now. Yeah.
This is crazy. You're crazy.
This is nuts.
Shutting it down.
Yeah. So of course I go and I'm talking to my mentor, who actually had moved to Hawaii after we sold her company, and she's like, "How's it going, Hallie? How's it going, really?" And I said, "It's funny that you asked me that." I said, "I keep hearing this voice that it's time to stop," and she goes, "Oh," and she is like this wise woman, and she's like, "Oh. Okay."
The voice.
The voice. And we went to dinner, the 4 of us, the husbands included, and we didn't really talk much about it. And she's a perturbator, which I think I got some of my disruptive nature from her and my mother. And she says, "Hey," to my husband, she's like, "Hey, Kelly, have you heard that Alexis thinks it's time to stop?" Yeah. Yeah.
At
dinner.
Oh my gosh. Just dropping a bomb.
Just dropped a giant shit bomb right on in the middle of the table. And the guy just looks at me and goes, "She's not stopping. I just built her this incredible studio. It looks like something out of Martha Stewart. She can drive her car in. She's got walk-in refrigeration. She works out of the house. We have everything we ever wanted. It's perfect. It's cool. We're not stopping." Right? He's like, logic. About 3 weeks later, he sits straight up in bed at about 1:30 in the morning. He looks at me and goes, "You're right. It's time to go. It's time to stop." Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is incredible that he came to that conclusion. I'm assuming that you didn't at the time majorly protest, push back, whatever.
No, I thought I was losing my
Or did
mind,
you?
like every other woman does when
Yeah.
she has an inspired or thought that doesn't make logical sense.
Any sense. Wow. And so that was kind of your first trial by fire into functioning really, because like you said, like you had built this business where you're able to function in your feminine as a creative, as in your creative, messy energy, where you had creative flow, etc., but still make the numbers. And then was this the first real big kind of like feeling into your like following your womanly intuition, feeling in your body to make big business decisions that seem crazy?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you maybe before we move on with the story, if there is more of the story, but can you talk to me about that feeling something in your body?
Yeah, absolutely.
And like what does that mean? What does that look like? Because it was brought up when I was talking with someone else recently, and they were like, "I don't know what that, like, I have no idea what that means or how to do that. I've never thought to do that. I've never thought to check in with my body. How do you do that?" And I was kind of like, Uh,
Yeah.
how does one explain this? So can you talk about
This
that?
is such a great question, because
Hello, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Ebby's podcast. To hear the full uncut version, to help me make more like this, and for tons of other extra content and behind the scenes goodies, head to my Patreon. Link is in the description below.
such a great question, because everyone's like, oh, just feel it in your body. Like, hello, we've been shamed
Yeah.
out of our bodies. We don't even want, like we strap our boobs down and pretend we don't have them. Like we're, never let them see you sweat kind of a thing. It's like there's a huge disconnect, first of all, in our culture around our bodies being these sacred divine vessels that are having this spiritual experience. So the way that I started to feel this, and I think that this was also part of the setup, was that, I was working at this holistic institute and I had a lot of body shame, right? I had a lot of body shame. Um, being modest and being not too sexy and not too pretty and all of these things. But I had started to get body work done, and body work meaning just massage, right? Just for stress relief and that
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. And that started to make me feel like more comfortable with my body and to start to really tune into, like, oh, my shoulder hurts, or oh, my hip is bothering me, or I'm having, like this fluttering in my chest. What is that, and what happens when I start to breathe? But building a relationship with my
Yeah.
body was going on since I was working at the Holistic Institute. And
Right.
so that had started. So I think the audible voice was the most interesting thing. The first time I had heard that audible voice, and what is different about the audible voice, not anxiety, right? The audible voice of truth, that divine wisdom that comes through, is that when we feel something in our body, we're like quick to push it away because it could feel uncomfortable or unknown. But it's really about developing a relationship with our bodies in a way that feels very peaceful. So if I have a thought about something and I have fear or some sort of anxiousness around it, I know that's not my body speaking.
Okay.
If the sensation in my body is that of like this grounded, rooted peace,
Yeah.
and it just stays there and it keeps coming back, that's when I know that it's true. And so to answer your question is like, how do we feel into our bodies? It's really about developing this relationship with her. And first of all, I would say uncovering any areas where we are in disapproval of our bodies.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Right. And we have been taught to shut down those sensations in our body, and the sensations of like that innate longing or pull. I remember when I was dating my husband, I would just get butterflies all the time. Just that longing, just that sick, just deep pull of like, oh, I just can't wait to smell his neck. I want to smell his neck. And I would be irritated by it, like the annoying irritation of being so like possessed by this, by this chemistry that was going on.
Yeah.
And probably one of the most illogical decisions I've ever made, and also one of the most satisfying decisions I've ever made, is marrying my husband. On
Wow.
paper, it probably didn't look really logical. And,
Yeah.
but 30 years later, I still have that I still get that ache.
That's incredible. I honestly feel like we could do a whole separate podcast on your marriage lessons and the story of your marriage and everything that you've learned along the way.
Well, let me tell you, when the woman rises, when the feminine rises, the masculine has to rise. It's the natural law of the universe, energetically and physically. However,
because they balance each other, and they have to balance each other.
Correct.
Yeah.
If the feminine rises, if the opening presents herself, the masculine will show up.
Wow, so many things I want to ask, because I want to ask, how do you do that? How do you rise in your feminine when you are in the midst of circumstances that don't seem to lend itself to that, or when because sometimes we want the masculine as the foundation and the kind of safe space for our feminine to thrive. Like that's ideal, right? But they go hand in hand. It's like a life cycle, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
which came first, the chicken or the egg? You don't know.
Yeah, and I think that social media has really given us a lot of illusion around that, right? They're like, "Oh, the man's in charge, the masculine's in charge, and he's supposed to lead." I'm gonna challenge that, right?
Do it,
The
please.
challenge is that believe, and we have evidence in nature, right, that egg chooses the sperm.
Mm.
True?
Yeah,
Right.
which is insane.
So, what
Genius.
if the feminine actually is the point of creation as she hosts and
Mm.
houses and facilitates the growing of the child? So, by the
Mm.
law of the universe, the feminine would be the point of desire, right? So, she has a
Mm.
aha moment. I want to have a baby. I want to bear fruit.
Mm.
I want to grow. I want to evolve. I want to start this business. And what happens is the masculine comes along, right?
Mm.
And serves the desire of the feminine.
Wow.
But she has to open
Yeah.
to that desire,
Mm.
whether it's a business or a baby.
Mm. So, when you talk about opening to desire, does this lead us back to, and I feel like I'm like, maybe it's just on my mind a lot. So I'm like, it all connects to rupture, but does it lead us back to rupture?
I love you so much. You're like, it's all going back to that place that we don't want to go. We don't want to go there. Don't go there. Do not touch that. It's a hot stove. Why would we
Right?
want to
Let's
go
not
there?
talk about it. Let's
Uh-huh.
not talk about it. We don't want to get messy. We don't want to get dirty or blood on our hands. Like, let's talk about
Nope.
the rupture, right? Because that's the opening, is it not?
Well, the water
And
breaks before the baby, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it doesn't always go back to rupture, right? So there can
Mm.
be a point of desire, for example, like the seed cracks. Um, is
Mm.
that rupture or is that desire?
Mm.
So
Mm. Both, either.
correct. Yeah. But I think that the thing that you're really asking is like, how do we do this? How do we open to desire? How do we open, right, in femininity when we have all the things to do, right?
Mm.
We've got
Because it feels, I think it's that feeling of uncertainty, right? Like if I'm going to open to this creative flow,
mhm,
this desire is so linked to like, I think this like primal, visceral thing, that feeling into your body.
mhm,
What's it going to say? Is it dangerous when I have cut it off for so
mhm.
long and I have this list of to-dos and my life has to be structured? And then if I start giving into my feminine cycle, my feminine whatever, the rupture, the desire could cause rupture. If I was really true and honest, it could be smooth sailing, but it could cause like a complete undoing in order for the new thing to be birthed. And that is scary.
It's terrifying. Yeah. And that's where,
Yeah.
that's where I very often am talking about like, how do we surf the edges of our uterus? How do we surf those dark spaces, right? How do we go into those
Mm,
dark spaces and hold ourselves,
mm, mm. Surf the edges of our
right?
uterus.
Surf the edges of the unknown.
Yeah.
Is the world flat? Is it round? What happens in those dark
Mm,
spaces? And, I think that
mm,
that really leads us to a conversation that is so multifaceted, like, shopping addiction, workaholism, any form of
mm,
addiction where we are distracting ourselves from being able to hold
mm,
ourselves in that truth. And
mm,
sometimes it looks like
mm,
just being messy and being mad about it for a minute
mm,
and allowing ourselves to
mm,
like really feel that rage or whatever it is that wants to come up and come through. I've done this
mm,
so often,
mm,
right? In every point of my evolution, my growth, my businesses, interactions with my partner, my children, my relationships with my family require me to go to the edge of myself,
mm. Yeah, I feel that
right? And that can be terrifying.
totally.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think even just like sometimes just being alone with your thoughts can be terrifying, you
Yeah,
know?
it's true. I used to
And
avoid yoga
and
just for that reason because I'm like, it's
right?
terrifying being in my head all by myself. Stop it.
Truly. It is, especially when you're used to life being full of like other people's needs and requests and whatever. And I think a lot of women find themselves in that in a lot of ways. Like, you go into motherhood,
Uh-huh.
that transition made into mother, like you talked about, like it does something to you. And then you're like, who am I? How do I find myself again? And then you find yourself in motherhood. And if you're not careful, can then lose yourself in it also, to the point where then trying to sit and feel into what your desire is versus the desires and needs of all the people around you feels not only impossible, but like wrong
Hmm.
at a physical level. There seems to be a lack of acceptance or allowance, like space for
Yeah.
just being and existing. And like that connection of women and feelings has been so tied to something negative, like our emotions being silly or too much, or just because we're hormonal or whatever else. And I have a whole thought process about actually the hormonal shifts that cause us to feel more deeply at certain times of the month being really valid and valuable and purposeful.
Yes.
But like, I think there's such a lack of space for women to just feel, and that to be like a valuable thing in and of itself, when I really think that the feminine energetic on the planet, aside from being very much the creative force, is like the feeling
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
force, you know?
Yeah.
And when we disconnect from that, it shuts it, like it f's up the whole balance,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You're so right. And you're so right on something. I call this the fallow, the void, right? We don't find value
Mm-hmm.
in our culture, nor have we been trained for this, nor have we been shown this, nor has it been um, edified or celebrated in any way
Mm.
to really hold the void, the dark space, the not doing, the stillness as important.
Mm. Mm.
And so, it it's like, so I'm postmenopausal. Many women are going through perimenopause earlier and earlier, right? More hormonal balances earlier. And I think that what's going on is that we have a culture that is really not supportive of the feminine. So therefore it's even more important for us to really be rooted as women and celebrate other women, and see other women and hold other women in the balancing and like what is best for their bodies, what is best for them. I'm very often saying to my daughter, you know, what do you need to do to take care of yourself before you start your cycle? And we have this
Mm-hmm.
thing. She's like, I need to go get my car washed, Mom, and I need to have a giant cheeseburger in the car wash because that's what we would do when she was little.
That's
Yeah,
fun.
we would get our space would get nice and cozy. We'd make a nest and we'd have a big fat hamburger, right? Because you're ravenous, right? You're getting ready to bleed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. That's like the time you want to feed yourself, is when you're
mhm.
in that lead up to the release in the period. That's when you want to like pour all the good things into
But
yourself.
denying that sensation, rejecting the sensation that we're getting ready to go into a space that we need to rest, we need to sleep more, we might need to call in happy. I used to tell her that all the time. I'm like, call in happy. Just call in happy. You're not going in. You got, take care of your body.
Mm. Call in happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's
Yeah.
an interesting concept. No one died. No one lost their job, but, she took really good care of herself. And I think that going back to the void, I'm postmenopausal. The thing that I see women struggling with the most as they're starting to go through perimenopause and the change is this idea of not productivity being productive. Like we're literally going
Mm.
into a chrysalis where we're rebirthing the truth of who we are,
Mm.
right? We
Wow.
have been externally
Yeah.
programmed to take care of and have babies and give. Naturally, it's in our DNA to give and be focused out there, right? Out there on what everybody else needs. And we're changing, right?
Mm.
To not being able to have babies, which is a more inward process. But that void, that
Mm.
pause phase is the thing that I see women reject the most. I can't pause. I
Wow.
can't stop. How do I stop? But once they stop, they see one, how exhausted they are, two, how necessary it is, and three, how uncomfortable they are without being or without doing something because their value has
Mm.
then been attached to something outside of the truth of who they are.
Mm. Mm. And if you don't stop long enough to recognize that, then you're never going to be able to
You're not
repair
going
it.
to ever have a true desire. Like you're not going to have a true
Mm.
overflowing sacred creation that's going to come from that uncomfort of the void or the dark space.
Mm.
So we need these times in our life, in our seasons of life, from maiden to mother, from mother to, to sage, to crone, to all of the things, but even seasonally, like even winter is a time
Mm.
to go into the dark.
Right. Which I think we've created so many systems in the modern
Mhm. Mhm.
world that disconnect us from even that nature's way of forcing us into these quiet fallow seasons, like where the fields have their rest, you know, and like nature is the greatest teacher, and everyone that works in any way with nature understands the importance of fallow seasons. Like plants, perennial plants in most places will die back, and then people caring for those plants will even like cut off extra excess dead leaves and things like that, so that all of the plant's energy can go into their roots and into keeping their roots safe and healthy through the winter, and then in the springtime to like really pushing those roots farther out and deeper before they sprout up again, so then that plant comes back the next year like twice as big as it was the year before, even though it died and then was like cut back. And yeah, like fields having to go through fallow seasons, you can't just keep planting the same crop over and over in a field. It's going to lose all of its nutrients. You have to let it go fallow, or you have to plant like a whatever you call it crop, you know, that puts different nutrients back into the soil. And I think that we've become so disconnected from that concept even, that then to try and apply it to ourselves, either on like a physical, like monthly schedule kind of level of like, hey, I actually need a bit of a fallow week here before, which I think is the luteal phase, well, end of luteal phase, beginning of menstrual phase, because I think the start of luteal phase is actually very productive. Usually that ovulation into the start of luteal phase is like your harvest kind of, and then going into that fallow so you can dip into the darkness, and then the menstrual phase actually being a very powerful time of like release and sometimes clarity if you are able to really drop into it. Apparently there's something where the hemispheres of your brain like connect better or communicate better during that time, so it's actually a good time for introspection and like journaling and deep thoughts and all that.
It's also,
but
it's
so
also,
even on that level,
it's also, you know, in the old days, one of the things, I don't know if you've heard this before, but the shamans or the, you know, the priests would want the women isolated into the red tent, right? Into the tent, because they knew that when they were bleeding, that they had such intuition and such connection, right, to higher and to different realms, that they did not feel like they had authority or power.
yeah,
Fascinating, right?
yeah, so they needed to isolate them all out there together. Slash, what it really does is put a bunch of powerful women whose cycles are probably all synced up together in a tent. And I truly believe that women gathering together in tents and gathering together in general has been the like great like foundation, the great central driving force of society and the world since the dawn of time, and something that a lot of us are really missing these days, because I think that when women gather in all of their differences and beauties together and talk and ruminate, and it's actually really, really powerful. And we do a lot through our, you know, our little womanly ways, our feelings and our emotions and our crafts and our whatever. Like actually there's a lot of depth there that, especially when gathered together, maybe we'll talk about that at the end, the women gathering thing.
Yeah, you know, what I've really noticed, and you know, this is true for me. I was in women's leadership and started going back and forth to New York, and I really didn't put a lot of value on female relationships, but I knew that there was something missing, and so I was actually looking for a master's degree, which there was none available at this time in feminine leadership. And this particular institute popped up, and so I would go back and forth to New York on a monthly basis. And being in this particular container where I had done first year and then second year and then served on leadership for several years afterwards, it was really fascinating because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into by gathering with other women. I didn't really know how to develop relationships. My only experience had been that of competition, right? And either, oh, you're too big for your britches, or maybe a little bit of that crabs in the bucket, like, I don't want you to go any higher than I am, so we want you to stay kind of small, feeling, to a place where, you know, in those 6 years, and I'm very public about this, with co-creating with other women, I made more money in those 6 years and created more asset and more wealth for my family than I did my entire career.
Okay, in those 6 years, what were you doing?
While working in a male-dominated construction industry. So I owned a disaster restoration company with my husband. I was also coaching and consulting. And I was very aware that I was not passionate about the construction industry, but I was in it because I'm really good at building systems and being a CEO for organizations, because of my
Yeah.
systems training, and also incorporating all of the things that I had learned around women and feminine leadership into my own company. We had like a zero point zero 0.05 injury and illness rate, which is unheard of in the construction industry. Like no one got hurt because
Wow.
we had such great processes and so much intentional care for our staff that people didn't want to get hurt. Like we valued
Mm,
them and they valued themselves and they valued the safety,
mm,
procedures and systems that we put in place to,
yeah.
almost no turnover as well. And so those are the kinds of things
That's wild.
that cost companies money is,
Yeah.
workers' comp and, high ratios of turnover. And so,
Mm,
being a woman CEO or an entrepreneur, I think it's critical for us to learn and develop these relationships with ourselves first so that we can actually
mhm.
impart them and teach them to others. The hard part is the rejection of self, though, right? We reject the
Mm,
messy. We reject the fallow.
right.
We reject the dark. We reject the parts of ourselves that we don't want anyone to know about.
Mm. And how does that affect something like entrepreneurship,
It
woman in
yeah. It
business, flourishing as a
yeah.
feminine energy in
Well,
that?
it can hold us separate or keep us in a position where we are not authentic, vulnerable, or collaborative. And we can't be good
Mm.
leaders if we're not authentic, vulnerable, or collaborative. That's how we fail, right? We fail.
Those actually sound like that actually sounds like a feminine leader's strengths, right?
Correct.
Like that's like the feminine in leadership, right? Authentic, vulnerable, and collaborative.
Yes. And curious too. The feminine is curious, right? If you think
Mm,
about the feminine being the water and the riverbank being the masculine, or in business we talk about this as the masculine is the systems, right? It's the container. It's
mm,
the dress code. It's the processy. It's the thing that we do, right? The container that
mm,
holds the desire. The water is the feminine. If the water wants to get
mm,
somewhere, it's going to find its way, but it has to be curious. It might have to go through a crevice or underneath a
mm,
rock or open over something, you know? But she's
mm.
going to find a
Yeah.
way.
Mm.
But without that masculine,
And
and
then,
this is why masculine is so
yeah.
important. Without the masculine, right? Without the containment, she's just going to be a stagnant puddle. She's not going to find
Mm.
her
Her
way, her
flow.
flow.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful picture of the way that those two can work together and even how like the feminine can like those that container, which I think sometimes through the lens of like the broken or the like toxic masculine and
Mm-hmm.
feminine, the idea of having the masculine be a container, like a boundary line, the is like
Yeah.
horrific, like a man containing me and holding me in, or, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
But then in reality, a river really shapes its riverbanks as well,
Uh-huh.
and so in a true kind of symbiotic, balanced and healed masculine feminine like I say relationship, but I don't mean like, boyfriend, girlfriend,
Sure.
whatever relationship, but as in the relationship between the two, they actually can influence one another and the water can influence its banks and its
Mm-hmm.
boundaries quite easily
Mm-hmm.
over time.
So it's really a different perspective, right, than the masculine leads. I I think that's a lot of pressure for the masculine. I don't think that the masculine really
Yeah.
has a purpose unless he knows what the feminine wants, right? And
Okay.
even integrating that into his own body, the masculine will be like, okay, I'm supposed to make the money, I'm supposed to do the containment, I'm supposed to serve the whole thing, but why? Why?
Mm,
What's your purpose?
mm,
It's to support
mm.
the desire of the feminine. It's to support the family. It's to protect the family.
Yeah. Right. To create that safe space, to create the container for you can't have an empty box.
Yeah. He,
It's
yeah,
lame.
what is he gonna do? Play video games all day because he's doing all this to play video games? Like, what is he doing? Like, no, he's not doing that. That's not what he wants. He wants he
Yeah.
wants these things because his truest heart's desire, this is where the divine masculine conversation comes in. His heart's desire is to serve
Mm.
creation, is
Mm.
to serve
Right.
desire.
Yeah. Yeah. In all aspects. And then I think that, which I think is really, I see this often as well in our disconnection from nature, and how, like, how often you see a man get kind of connected to, maybe gets a little bit of like spiritual enlightenment or something, and they get really into nature often, and just wanting to be in nature,
Hmm.
to want to cultivate nature,
Hmm.
to want to garden and things like that. And it's actually things that are seen as kind of girly, but like it's actually not like, farming and cultivating and protecting. And like Kendreas loves to just go out on our property and like check out what trees need a branch cut because it's dead and it's harming them and
Hmm.
whatever,
Hmm.
and it's that kind of
Uh-huh.
stewardship of creation.
Hmm.
And
Protection.
then I think that echoes, doesn't it,
Hmm.
into then our relationships, which I think are often a kind of picture symbol of creation, of the natural world, and of the woman,
Yeah.
the feminine being kind of the creative force itself, and the masculine being the steward
Yeah.
and protector.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
husband's really creative. Like, he loves to work with his hands. He loves to like make candles and build things, and he's
Mm.
very, very creative. He's very in touch and very integrated with his feminine. The interesting thing is I think that we have a TikTok reel of what that's supposed to look like in a patriarchal environment.
Mm.
I'm not quite sure that's
Yeah.
completely accurate. I think there's a blend of both because we
Yeah.
need both. We really do need the integration of both within ourselves.
As in, each individual
Correct.
needs both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need a balance of the two.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that men need other men. I think they need to gather in community as well. I think they need to feel the support and to be held by other men, you know,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that deep vulnerability and also accountability and
Mm.
containment.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that's so wise. And that feels like a bit of the feminine energy coming through for them, right? And the way that they kind of hold that balance and balance out their usually dominant masculine energies, but sometimes it's not. I've known some incredible
Yeah.
partnerships where it very much seems like their natural way, once they found their natural flow, the man in the relationship actually held a lot more of the feminine energetics, and then the female held some of the masculine and at least, what, thinking of it in terms of the outer expression of that and how most people would perceive it. But then actually, when I think of it now, that man was actually creating a container for what his partner needed and wanted and desired to do. And even though the container actually looked like a lot more like soft and nurturing things, and the woman was doing a lot more like kind of like aggressive, powerful moves, it was still that kind of, it still had that energy of a
You
container
mean
and a
aggressive,
flow.
powerful, or strategic wise?
Maybe strategic wise. Yeah.
Hmm. Did you know that
Mm.
women live 10 to 20 years longer than men do?
I did know
Do you know
that.
why?
What's your thoughts?
It's called
No. Oh, well,
it's called
I
the
have
grandmother
thoughts.
hypothesis. And
Okay.
we become
Hit me.
unfertile, however, we still live longer because the biology requires the transfer of information. So we become the
Hmm.
teachers and the wise teachers that need to impart the information because of
Wow.
our makeup.
Wow. Like the crone being necessary for the continuation of society.
Correct.
I look to you as someone who is aging with so much like vivacity. Is that a word? That's a word, right? Vivacity and effervescence, and in a way that makes me excited for that process. And with beauty, and she's great. But like, you have specific thoughts on
I
aging
do.
as a
I
woman.
do.
Will you share some of those?
Yeah. it wasn't, many dark nights of the soul and, the countless ways that I was trying to modify myself to fit in, to be accepted. And most of it was for business, honestly. Most of it was so that I would have influence in the boardroom or in the negotiation table. Because if I looked as though I was still 30 and I appeared to be fertile and fun and whatever it was that I was trying to emulate, then I would, make the sale or have the deal or have the negotiation or that kind of go my way. But the thing that really changed for me was when I started to enter the boardrooms, enter the negotiation table from my feminine, because I was quite disturbed that if I came with all of my strategy and my wisdom into the room, men very often would either want to exit, right, the room, or they didn't want to, there would be a conflict. They would bump up against my ideas, right? But as soon as we start to enter a room with our feminine energy, right, which is curiosity, tell me more. What do you think? Here's my desire, right? This open receptivity. It's really fascinating to me how all of a sudden every man at the table wants to solve my problems.
That sounds like such a powerful position to be in.
Right. However, it really doesn't have anything to do with the way I looked. And when I started to really unravel this, my thoughts on aging was that I wanted to age and I wanted to be an example for other women. That did not mean that I was going to modify my face anymore or my hair anymore or my body or whatever that was at the time. And I really wanted to be an example for my daughter and other women that people will feel me before they will see me. And that's what I want, is I want them to feel truth. I want them to feel authenticity. I want them to feel the love and the embodiment of that, not my eyelashes or whatever it is.
So you've made a commitment to not altering,
No.
Botoxing,
No,
adjusting.
obviously, not that I do not love the idea of like paralyzing my face. I've done some additional research, and apparently, when our face does not move, those micro expressions, though, that we as humans actually, 90% of our connection is done through micro expressions, which creates intimacy.
Wow.
And so I have decided that I want intimacy and I'm going to learn to love my wrinkles and my 11s.
That is such a beautiful reason because I I recall also hearing things about that too, but I mostly connect to the idea of Botox as a neurotoxin, and so it's not good for you. But then sometimes I'm like, a little neurotoxin.
Right? Tiny, tiny bit.
Couldn't do that much, could it? Just a little tiny bit to get rid of these 11 lines. But I think that is actually such a more like embodied and what's the word? Integritus?
Yeah, integrous.
Whatever, integritus, reason.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, our physical expression of feeling and emotions and the way that other people can sense that too. Yeah, there's microaggressions, micro-expressions.
There's some of those that happen for sure.
They need to see our microaggressions. I think it's those micro expressions that we don't even consciously pick up on, right? But like we sense, and it helps us to interpret people's feelings about us and our feelings about them. And I also think I've heard, and maybe this is what you said or not, but that like it also informs how we feel. Like when we express, like when we smile and we're expressive with our own selves and faces, it actually like can give us like dopamine and serotonin and all that. Which is another great reason to not want to dull your expression in any way, especially as you age and just want to like to squeeze the most out of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I
it's,
love that.
it really did require a deep dive. I'm like, what do I want? What do I want? I want relationship. I want connection. I want deep intimacy. All right. Well, if that's what I want, why do I want this other thing? And that took a minute. Takes a minute,
Yeah.
to really sit with that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe they won't like me. Maybe I'm not pretty enough. Maybe whatever the thing is. Yeah.
That's a powerful challenge in this in the current day and age, and it's not that there's anything wrong or against any woman that that does want to choose that path. I think it's just a really powerful and beautiful side of it to hear from you and from someone who I think a lot of people look up to, and I definitely look up
Thank
to.
you. I look up to you too.
I think that's something that you have really fostered as you have mentored men and women, but you really have a heart for mentoring women and gathering women. It's something I really have a heart for too, and I've just barely dipped my toe in, and I want to do a lot more of. In the online space and in person, and it's something that I'm learning from you and that you are imparting to me, which I'm really honored to be learning, because I think this value of women's circles and spaces is something that needs to be honored, protected, and passed down. So with all that being said, I'm really excited to be kind of shadowing slash co-hosting, tagging along with this retreat with you in November, which I'm
Yes.
really excited about. And that can kind of be expanded on elsewhere, but I would really love for you to introduce a little bit of this idea of women's retreat, your heart for women's retreats, and what this retreat
Yeah.
is about.
Yeah. So let me just give all of our listeners a little bit of the backstory. Here's the truth. I'm not quite sure how long I'm going to be teaching. And it's really important for me at this time in my life for me to be very clear about what my intention is and what my desire is. My desire is that this is my legacy work, right? It's I used to speak on stages that were really large and really big, and speak to thousands of people at a time, and have that big desire for a big platform. I don't have that desire. I have a desire to impart this information to a handful of women that are going to take this and also carry the messaging and the information to other women as well. And the embodiment of the feminine that I see that is so difficult for women right now is to actually open to possibility. And the more women that we can touch, the more women they're going to touch. And so that leads us to this collaboration that we've been talking about, which is a women's retreat in November. And it's a very intimate retreat. It may or may not call to you. It's a 5-day intimate retreat.
Every time I hear you talking about it, every time that we're connecting about it, I'm like, I need to go on this retreat.
You are going on this
going.
retreat, are facilitating this retreat. And
it's great.
women are going to receive a sacred reset. They're also going to receive like real practical daily embodiment practices and rituals. They're going to get teachings from not just the two of us, but they're also going to get teachings from Carol Valenzuela, who is this incredible woman who is a grandmother of 8. And wait till you see, she's like so hot. I mean, she's hot. She's so hot, right? Like so hot.
Yeah.
And so like
I want what she's having.
Yeah, she's so like alive and like just you should see her grandchildren interact with her. I'm just like, yeah, I want to hang. I want Grandma Day. I want to come over for Grandma Day. I mean, she's amazing, and she's a VP of a multi-million-dollar company, and she has 8 grandchildren and been married for a gazillion years. Like, where is this practical wisdom, right? Very often, I'll see a woman who's really successful and leading a big company, but she'll be really sad that she doesn't have a relationship, and that's what she really desires. That's her next evolution. Or maybe she has a really great relationship, but she knows that she's got something inside of her that needs to come out, and she doesn't know how to get it out. This retreat is also for her. I'm the unlikely business entrepreneur. I'm the unlikely success story. I was a shy, introverted artist. All I wanted to do was color and listen to music and dance by myself. And I didn't want to talk to anybody because people are scary.
That's so hard for me to imagine for
Ask
you.
my parents. Like, I would cry when I saw strangers. I would literally just start crying. They were like, "You're afraid of everybody." And I was like, "Yep, it's true. I was." So, also, we can't create abundance without regulating our nervous system. And so with so many people saying, how do I shut my brain off? We're going to talk about that. We're going to fix that too. We'll be doing like a pre-call before the retreat to get everybody open and prepared and ready for this. And then we'll also be doing an integration call afterwards so that people aren't floundering out there. There's the bonus day for the aligned life and feminine business design. And then there's an optional one-on-one session if you want to do that with me. And this is a circle of really powerful women. And I hope that whoever is listening who feels this call will look a little deeper and move towards that desire.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll put links to that website and a special Ebby discount
Oh,
code
that's right.
that you can get on top of the early bird special. And so I'll put that all in the show notes for
Mhm.
listeners. And again, it's like it might be something that isn't sitting for you right now or just isn't in your flow or whatever, and it might be something that really hits you and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I really need to do
Mhm.
this and make it happen." So you can always message me and reach out as well, like if it's something that you really really want to get into and talk about but you're like nervous or you don't
Yep.
understand, you don't know quite how you're going to make it happen.
So the name of the retreat is called Receive, and it's for
Hmm.
you to learn to open to receive effortlessly and lure and become
Yeah.
magnetic as opposed to penetrative and striving and stressed out.
Mm. I love that so much. And if people want to just get a little taste of getting their hands dirty and continue to get your wisdom and your reminders in their life, where can they find
Mm.
you in socials? I'll also put this in the show notes, but I want people to be able to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you can follow me on social media. I'm not a huge social media person. I do a lot of teachings online, and you can subscribe to those at alexisasbe.com. And you can find me on Instagram
Amazing.
or friend me on Facebook.
Alexis
Yeah.
Asbe. Awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend checking out alexisasbe.com. And can people find your past, like, kind of teachings and Zoom sessions and all of that on
Some of
there?
them, but they'll also be invited to like
Yeah.
free offerings that I have or special classes or
Yep.
those kinds of things that maybe they can't
Yep.
make it to this retreat, but they might be really interested in doing a one-on-one session or something where they just need to get something cleared, you know.
Yeah, highly recommend.
Hmm.
Super valuable to invest in yourself in some of these things that seem a little bit more, what's the word?
Decadent.
Ephemeral, perhaps. Decadent, yes. And not always what we think of as a practicality, but that
Mhm.
investing in your inner self and your foundational inner work and the wisdom of other women in your life is really, really powerful. So thank you for coming and bringing so much of that here today.
Yeah, I love you so much. It's so fun talking to you.
Love you
Yeah,
too. Thank you for
my
being here.
pleasure.